So then we have a custom SQL and the dynamic SQL. So yesterday we were discussing like in a custom SQL, it's just uh, kind of box where just like SQL developer, we write any custom logic. The same way we have to write it in the custom SQL. And the similar scenario is with respect to the dynamic SQL, but we have to pass the query at runtime. So instead of writing the query at design time, at the runtime of a service, we can write and pass any type of query. And then apart from that, we have a template which we call as batch insert SQL and batch update SQL. So what batch insert SQL is, like generally when we insert any operation, we insert it one single row by row. Let's say if you have a table which has a four columns, then if you try to insert insert data to the all the four columns, we have to insert row by row. But in case of batch insert, we can have 10 rows or 100 rows at a time, and we can insert it in one single insert statement. The similar is the case with the batch update SQL. Like we can have more than one rows updated at a time using the batch update SQL. And at last, like we have a stored procedure with signature and executor service. So the stored procedure and the stored procedure with signature is basically used when you are interacting with a stored procedure of an Oracle database. So let's say stored procedure is available in Oracle, and we try to interact or we'll try to call it. We try to get the parameters and get the response back to the web method services. In those type of scenarios, we use a stored procedure and a stored procedure with signature. And the last is the executor service. So generally, like frankly speaking, in a real-time scenario till now, I have never used executor service. But theoretically, the use of executor service is like when we use an adapter service, we use a connection. Like we configure we choose a connection to use, and then by using an executor service, we can pass that connection whatever we have chosen to any particular Java service or a flow service. What I mean to say, I will show you. Maybe it is more clear for you. So these are the available templates in case of an adapter, and then we can have a pure Java service written, and just like in Eclipse we write any Java service to interact with a database, we can do the same thing here. So let's start with the whatever the predefined templates we have, like select, update, insert, and delete. 90% of all the templates are same, like whatever we have: select, update, insert, and delete. Apart from a custom, dynamic, and stored procedure with signature and the badge. So we'll go with the select operation. Let's have chosen one select operation. So we in a select template, we have different tabs available here. Like we have a table, join, select, and so on. Now, when we click on the table tab, we have options to choose the tables which are available in the database. So just to select a table, we have to click one row, and when you click on this one, we'll have all the schemas available in the current database, which we can use to select a particular table. So I have just chosen two tables here. So we can have more than n number of tables. The reason we can have more than n number of tables, like we have a join option also. So we can have a join statement over more than one table. So let's just start with the first table itself. Now, if we are choosing just one table, we don't have to select the join statement. Now in the select clause, now here in the select clause, like we can select whatever the columns which are available in a particular table which has been selected in the table tab. So now there are two things, like we have option called fill in all the rows to the table. The second option is insert rows. So if you are going to select or click on this option, it will automatically populate this web page or this GUI with all the columns available to this particular table, whatever the tables which you have selected in the table tab. Now if we are going to use this insert row, it will just insert one particular row, and here we can choose the particular columns which we want to display. Then we have a where statement where we can put the where conditions, like if we want to do a select operation on certain column with certain values, then we can put the where clause here. And finally we have adapter settings, which will tell you the details like what is the adapter name, which connection it is using, and what is the template, basic template. And then we have input output parameter, which will tell the details what is the input parameter of a service, and what will be the output parameter. So whatever the fields or the columns which we select as a selector statement, all those fields will be appearing as the output parameter of the service. Now generally in input parameter, like just we are doing a select operation, so we don't need an input parameter because we are not going to pass any details. So but in almost every template, this input parameter will be by default. Even if you are not going to, even if we are using a statement which does not require input parameter, these things will be present as input parameter. The reason is like for example, as we have seen in the adapter settings, this particular template is using this connection, but at runtime, let's say we have decided we want to use some other connection name, we can override those details by passing the value in this parameter. So whatever we have configured the connection name, or whatever this ad service template is using a connection, we can override those connection at runtime by passing the value of new connection name in the connection parameter available here. And similar is the case with the DB username and the password. Let's say when we are configuring this connection and we were using this connection in this template, we have to define the username and password to interact with the database. But if we, let's say, if we want to give some other privilege, and we have created a new user and have given just a privilege to read the data, we can override the username and password, but just by passing here. So it will override whatever the configurations which are present in this new connection parameters. And then finally we have the logged fields where we can log the information about what are the input parameters and output parameters, either to the server log or MWS. And finally the comment tab is basically the same thing, like what this select operation is doing, we can write the comments. Okay, so let's try to run this. So here you see I have not passed anything. So if we are not going to pass anything, what do you do? Hello? Is anyone asking any question? Okay, fine. So if we are not passing any information here, it is going to take these information from the adapter connection which we have used while doing the design of the select operation. So once we click on the OK, it will give you details like the employee ID, employee name, and the designation. And in the output parameter will tell you like the number of rows which has been present in the operation. Now one more details is available in this fields, like we have a fields called maximum row, query timeout, result field, and result field type. So result field, you can give any variable name where it will tell you like how many rows are present, just like I have given an output here. So it is telling me for this table this has only one row with this data available. Now we have option called maximum rows and query timeout. Generally what happens, like when we have a select operation, if we have more number of rows in a data, we have an option to choose how many rows we can extract from that particular table. If we are giving a value of 0, by it's the default value, and it means it extracts each and every row present in that particular table. If we are giving a value of, let's say, 5, it will extract the 5 rows only. It will not extract more than 5 rows. So there is a use of maximum row. Now the query timeout is like, for example, here we are running a select operation. So basically what we are preparing a query called a select from this table and select all these columns from this particular web employee table. Now we are restricting this adapter template to run for certain time only. Like when we are setting as a query as minus timeout, there is a property in the server CNF file where it will tell you within that particular time interval this whole select operation has to be completed. If it is not completed, it will throw an exception. So again, the minus one is by default, which will take value from the server CNF file. We can have any value. We can have 0. We can have any positive value. So if it is a 0, it means the query will run for infinite time. So there will be no timeout basically. So if the select operation is taking, let's say 15 minutes, 1 hour, there will be no timeout from the integration server perspective. Now, if you give any positive value, let's say 15 or 30, it means the query will run for 15 seconds. And in that 15 second, the query is not completed, it will give you through an exception saying the timeout. So these properties like maximum row, query, timeout, result field is common in almost every operation, sir. So let's see, like we here, we have one row here. Now let's put some where clause here. Now how to generally provide a where clause? So we have to just click on this one, choose a particular column on which we want to give a where clause, and give the field name. So you can give the field condition like a. So what will happen at runtime? Now you see in the input output parameter we have a field called employee ID name. So at the runtime we can pass this value. So now the query will be like select a star from the employee table where employee ID name, employee ID value, some like we can provide here. So it will substitute and it will execute the operation. Now you see we are not getting any output because there is no employee with the employee ID 8787. So in a similar kind of scenario, you can give more than one condition like and or. So you can have an option like and or not. Still now any confusion with respect to the select? You can do kind of a POCs on these things.
No, Piyush, clear.
Okay. Now we'll go to the insert operation. So as I said, like you see, almost 80 to 90% of the things are common in insert template also. Like we can have a table tab where we can again choose the table. Now in the insert, basically we are going to pass the data. So now we have to select the columns for which we are going to pass the data. So in a similar fashion, how we were doing it for the select operation, we again have the same button where we can select all the rows or some part of the rows where we can pass the information. And in the result tab, like we can have a field configured which will tell you the information like how many rows has been inserted and similar kind of adapter settings, input output parameters. So for example, if I'm trying to run this, so here it will be asking me input details. Now you see here we can pass only one row at a time. Like if we have a table which has these many columns, we can pass only one row at a time. So if you're going to insert this data, it will tell me like one row has been inserted. If I am again trying to insert it, saying one row has been inserted. Now let's see how many data has been inserted. You see this designation has these many data available. In a similar fashion, like we have a concept called what do you call this as update and the delete. Okay, now coming to the batch insert. Now you see here like we were in the select operation, we were trying to select the data from the employee table. Let's see. Let's remove first this condition. Now we have one row in that particular employee table with this data. Now I have created one batch insert statement where I have chosen the same table, and we have insert details like I'm going to insert every rows, and the batch result is the same thing, like you can define any field like a number of rows inserted. And the remaining tabs are exactly the similar. Now the only difference in a normal insert statement and the batch statement is we can have more than one data which can be inserted. Now you see here, in a single operation, I'm going to insert 3 rows at a time. It will tell you number of rows inserted. Now if I'm going to select the same table and see how many rows are present there. So now it is telling me we have total 4 rows. So earlier one row set was there, and now we have inserted 3 rows. So it is now displaying total 4 rows. Okay, so one particular things we have to remember is like whenever we are using a batch insert or a batch update, we have to always use connection which is using local transaction. We cannot have a batch insert or batch update using a connection which is using a node transaction. Basically, at the design time itself, it will throw an error for you. When we are selecting a batch insert or batch update template, and when we have option to choose the connection, you have to select only the connection which is having a transaction type as local. If you select it as no, at design time itself, it will throw you an error saying that we cannot have a batch insert statement as a no transaction. Till now, any query, any confusion?
No, Piyush.
Okay, now we'll go with the custom service. So as I told you, like in a custom service is like just like how we provide the information in a SQL developer. In a similar way, we can write a complete SQL statement here, and it will give you the same output. Let's say I'm trying to get the data from the same table. Just we have to run this. What is the table name? WP mode employee. Okay. So you see here, like we can have any kind of a statement, but this statement we cannot change at runtime. Like we can have any statement like delete also from the table or insert any kind of a statement we can have. So this gives us the flexibility, like if you are writing a big statement like select or select from multiple tables and then join and then nested select and all those things. So those type of big statement you can write it here, because these type of operations it is very difficult to write in a normal select template. So for those type of scenario, we have a custom template. Now coming to the point of dynamic template. Okay. Now, as I said, like in dynamic template, we can pass the whole uh, SQL query at runtime. So the syntax to pass the query at runtime is this one. You have to provide a dollar symbol and then middle braces and any parameter name. So whatever the parameter name that you have provided in the SQL query, that will appear as the input parameter of the service. And whatever the fee or whatever the SQL statements we are passing this in this particular feed at runtime, it will be substituted, it will be compiled, and then it will be executed. So for example, let's say I have defined a query here. Let's say I have select. It will give you the details. Again, we can have a where clause as well. Where you want to okay. So it'll give you the details just specific to one data. Now again, like as you can have this way of a statement, or you can have this way of a statement. So we can have some part of the statement getting substituted at runtime, or we can have a whole statement getting substituted at runtime. It's purely based on the way we are doing the coding. So these type of facilities are present in the dynamic SQL. Any confusion, any questions you want to ask till now? Fine, then we'll move for the transaction type. Okay, so yesterday we were discussing about the transaction boundaries. So generally what happens, like whenever an adapter service starts running, like whenever we are issuing any query to the SQL or any query to the Oracle database which we are using here, like we should be aware of like when we have to start the process, when we have to commit the process, or when we have to roll back the process. Now, in web methods, like these processes are done by a property called a transaction type, which we define generally in the connection parameter. So, let's say if I'm using a connection, so here in the transaction type we have option like local transaction, node transaction, and access transaction. So these property defines how the process of execution of a particular SQL statement will work with respect to the web methods. So we have three options basically, which is local transaction, node transaction, and access transaction. Now, when coming to the part of local transaction, we have again two subdivision, which we call it as implicit transaction and explicit transaction. Now, in an explicit transaction, it is a duty of a developer to define the boundary of a transaction. So, boundary of a transaction basically means the start of a transaction and the commit of a transaction. This is called as one boundary, or the start of a transaction and rollback of a transaction. This is called as another boundary. So either you start the process and successful it, or you start the process and fail it. Now, how generally we explicitly as a developer define the boundary of a transaction is by using a service. So we have a three service present in the WMART package, which gives you a boundary of a transaction. So the start, we have a start transaction, we have a commit transaction, and the rollback transaction. So the start transaction, generally the start transaction will be put as a service, as a top service before the starting of any adapter service, and the commit transaction will be present as the last part of any flow service. The reason, let's say we have n 5 or 6 flow services and we are defining if any of the service get failed, we have to roll back. So what happens, like if you start a transaction and if this service got failed, generally the flow will move to the catch block and it will roll back the transaction. But if you put the commit as this part and you have one more service, then it will commit the first service and it will not commit the second service. So it again based, like we can have various ways to define the boundary of a condition. So it's purely based on the business scenario what we have. So the way to define the normal scenario, the way to define the start transaction, commit transaction, and rollback transaction is like this. Now, let's say we have a business scenario where we are doing an operation A, and then operation B, and then operation C. Now, if these operations are independent of each other means if the success or failure of operation A doesn't matter with the success and failure of operation B, on similar scenarios with respect to C and vice versa with C with respect to A. So in that case, we can have for A operation we can have separate boundary, for B operation we can have separate boundary, and for C we can have a separate boundary. But let's say a scenario where we have an operation like if A will be successful, then we have to perform operation B, and if B is successful, then we have to perform operation C. In those kind of scenario, these all has to come under one single boundary. So either all the process are committed or all the processes are executed successfully or all the processes are rolled back. So it's purely based on the requirement what you have, you can design the scenario. Now let's say like the scenario first, like how we are going to define it. So if we have, let's say, insert operation, we can have one more commit here, and let's say we have one more insert operation. We can again start the transaction boundary here, and we can again commit it. So similarly, we can have multiple start transaction on a commit transaction boundary, depending on like if the services are independent. But if we have a scenario of second case, then in that case, like we have to be the main start, and at the end it should be committed. Now we have to take care of certain things like while defining the transaction boundary.
Here for all operation we need to have a different services for select different and for update and all like that.
No, all operation we
Like here we are doing for insert adapter.
Yes.
Sorry. But what operation we are doing here exactly?
Okay.
Like only we have mentioned only the starting of the transaction and the connection which you are using and all adapters.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, then where will mention like will it take from that? I'm not getting.
No, I'm also not getting a question. Like what exactly
No,
we are.
no. See,
Okay.
we have written this service.
Fine.
Yeah, like how I will find like for which it is working, like is which operation it is doing, insert, select, update, what it is doing, how will find.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what once you create this template right there, we have to drag and drop and push it into the flow service. Okay. Now once you have given the data in the flow service, you can like say have a input document defined, and you can map the data just like we map any flow service. So at the runtime, when you are running this service and passing in here the input parameter, it will be passed to these details, and it's the same thing, like it will try to execute that particular operation and give you the output. Okay. So similarly, we can have any operation, like let's say you have batch operation, we can drag and drop it here, then it will give you an option to provide the input. Now you see here we have a list, so we can have multiple data inserted parallelly.
But it will run all the thing, right? Like if I make it insert and after that update, select
Yes,
whatever
it
I
is
give.
going to run each and everything. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I was saying, like while defining the transaction boundary, the boundary should be such that when we are using a start a commit between those boundary, we should not mention something like a start or simply commit. So while defining the transaction boundary, it should be either this start transaction or commit transaction. It should not be like this one, like a start transaction, and then commit transaction. Because what will happen when we are starting a transaction, internally server runs some thread. So when it encounters this start transaction, it runs a thread. Again, encounters a start transaction, it again runs one more thread. Now it is going to commit the transaction. So what it will do, it will close this thread, but there is one more thread still available. So the set what we have, the start transaction and commit transaction, or start transaction and rollback transaction, that pair should always be there. It should never be like you mention just one of the pair, or you just mention the pair in a wrong way. For example, it should not be like this. It should not be like this: start transaction, then start transaction, and then commit, and then start. So it will give the integration server a confusion, like when we have, it will not give, like basically what we are doing here, we are just writing a service, but internally this service is doing something while maintaining the boundary. So if you are not specifically defining the boundary, the server will get confused and it will give you uh, hung thread kind of error. So we have to be very careful while defining the boundary of a transaction. Second most important thing with respect to connection, with respect to a transaction, while using a connection, we can have only one local connection. I mean to say we can have n number of services, n number of adapter services, which is using only one type of local connection within one transaction boundary. We cannot have more than one kind of local connection within the same boundary when we are using and explicit or implicit and which is within the same boundary. Am I like clear, or like you got?
No, please, I didn't get.
Okay, so let's try to understand this. So these things we have to take care while doing the design time. So let's say we have a service A, which is basically an adapter service. It can be anything, insert, update, delete, or anything, which is using a connection C1. Okay, which is of type local. Type in the sense the transaction type which we define in the connection parameter. The transaction type is local. Let's say we have one more service B, which is again using the same connection, because we can have more than one services which is using the same connection. So this connection type again is local transaction. We have one more connection C, which is using C2 connection, which is again of type local. Now if we are doing an explicit, we are defining the boundary of it. So while designing in a flow service, let's say I have started the transaction. Here is the rollback process, commit process, and then finally in the catch block we have rollback process. Start. Now in this, let's say we have a flow service design where we have done the start transaction, commit transaction, and rollback transaction. Now in this flow service, you can use service A, you can use service B, but we cannot use service C within the same boundary of start and commit transaction because it's using a separate connection, which is a transaction type of local. Okay. Now to use the connection or to use the service C, what we have to do again, we have to put one more start transaction and commit transaction here. So at design time, it will not give you any error, but while doing a runtime, it will show you error in earlier scenario. So always remember, like we cannot have more than one connection type, which is of local, or we cannot have more than one services which is using a connection and having which is using different connection and which is transaction type as local within the same boundary. It has to be in different boundary conditions. Now it is clear.
Yeah, but for others we can use for no transaction and for
Yes, we'll come to the point like
uh,
why when we discuss on the no transaction. Okay, so that is called as explicit transaction. So when we are defining the complete boundary like this one, that is called as explicit transaction. Now the second thing which is called as implicit transaction. So just like in explicit transaction, it's the duty of a developer to define the transaction boundary. In an implicit transaction, we rely on an integration server to define the boundary condition. Okay, so we rely on the integration server means like when the service starts, for example, let's say we have just in this service, like we have just provided a two service which is using the same connection. Now we will not be defining any we will not be using any services like a start, commit or rollback. So we'll just rely on integration server to do the commitment, like a commit or rollback of the whole operations. So that type of transaction is called as implicit transaction. So how exactly the implicit transaction works? In a flow service, when it encounters the first adapter service, it the integration server internally will start the transaction. Now, when the whole flow service is successful or the whole flow service is failed, based on that, it will either commit or the rollback. So, if the flow service is successful, it is going to commit the operation. If it is failed, it is going to roll back everything. So that is called as implicit transaction. Now, coming to the point, like what is the like basic attributes of a local transaction? So generally we call the local transaction as no auto commit, like we have to explicitly commit it. So explicitly commit it in the sense like either we have to define the boundary condition to commit the operation or we have to rely on the integration server to commit it. So let's see. Let's first discuss the no transaction, then it will be more clear to understand how exactly it works. Now coming to the second point, which we call it as a no transaction. So the general definition of a no transaction type is auto commit. Auto commit in the sense like let's say we have a same adapter service A, B, C. Now they are using connection C1, C1 and C2 having a transaction type as no transaction. So now each operations are independently auto commit. We don't have to commit explicitly. So there is no concept of explicit transaction boundary in case of no transaction. Second thing, like if the first operation is successful, second operation is failed, it will not roll back the first operation. So each operations will be running independently. So each operation will be auto committed as soon as the operation starts and the ends, the data will be committed to the table. It will not allow you to roll back from a service perspective. Now let's see a demo like how the things works.
1 second, Piyush.
Yeah.
If it is a auto commit and auto rollback happens, what is the advantage and what is the disadvantages of this? So when there is an auto commit is happening, when there is a auto rollback is happening,
Okay.
why there is a, why there is a local transaction still?
Okay. It like these are the like properties which
Any
have been
best advantages that it has?
yeah, correct. Like everything has like in web methods, these are the features which has been provided. Let's say you have a business scenario, just like we discussed. For example, if you are doing, you have developed services where it is taking data from a customer portal where customer is ordering something, and then you are processing it, and then the payment operation is happening, and then once the payment is done, you have to send the success report. Now let's say someone is ordering some product, and it is fetching the details from a database, and then it is going to the payment option. Once the payment is confirmed, it is inserting a row into a database giving you the status of the payment, and then finally it is sending an email. Now all these operations are interrelated. Like if one of the operation has failed, we don't have to process the whole thing. So if in those type of scenario, let's say if you are going to use a no transaction type, it will not work. Because if let's say the customer has placed the order and has not done the payment, the order has been placed, it will give you an ambiguous information, the order has been placed, and then later point of time you come to know, okay, the payment has not been processed, so you have to explicitly manually remove the
Yeah.
data kind.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah, I understood it. I
yeah,
have
yeah,
another, I have one more similar question here.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, tell me, yeah.
Uh, if it is a local transaction and it is implicit commit, explicit and implicit, we have this transaction types, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
what is the difference between local implicit and no transaction?
Okay, that's what I will show you in a demo, like
Yeah.
how
Okay.
exactly it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's first discuss the no transaction type. Like I have created two operations. Okay, basically it's basically the same operation, insert transaction, and if you check the property of the adapter service having, it's the no transaction type property. Now what we are doing here, we are trying to insert the data into this particular table, like system or designation table, and it has a field called employee ID, okay, which is set as a mandatory parameter, but it should not be null. Now in the first part, left in the first service, I'm trying passing the information from this document which is defined at the runtime, and in the second, I'm just hard coding the information and keeping this employee ID intentionally as a null, so that what will happen, this service will be successful, this service will be failed. Now let's first see what are the data present here, this particular table. Now we have so many records. Let's just first clear the data.
Delete star from, right? Everything we
No,
wanted
no,
to delete.
yeah. So I'll just clear everything, then it will be easy to understand. So now see, everything is gone now. Again, just to confirm it. Okay, so there is no data here. Now I'm going to use a service to insert the data into the same table, but the first service will be successful, second service will be failed. Now these two services are using a no transaction. So as per the properties of a no transaction type, each services will be running independently. So let's see what happens. I'm passing some information like employee ID unit 2234. Okay, and you see here I received an error stating that cannot insert null into the designation, because in the second operation I have provided this employee ID intentionally as a null, and for remaining part I have provided the value. Now let's run this select operation again. You see, one of the row was inserted, which means that this operation was successful, this operation was failed. Now because these were using a no transaction type, these were running independently. Now let's say of a same scenario which we are trying to implement using a local transaction, and we are using an implicit operation. I've used the same adapter service, okay, insert adapter, which is basically pointing to the same table here, but using a local transaction type. Okay, here I'm also doing the same thing, like basically passing in the second step. I'm intentionally not passing the employee ID, so this service will fail. The first service here also will be successful, the second service will fail, but now it is using a local transaction time. Now let's say I pass a new employee ID 9876. This is local. So here also we receive a failure scenario like cannot insert null into it, but let's see the output. Like you see, even if this particular adapter service was successful, we didn't receive the data. It didn't insert the row. The reason because now we are using an implicit transaction and we are relying on an integration server to commit it. So the concept of implicit transaction is if we are using a connection and if any of the operation of particular connection get fails, it will roll back everything. So here in our scenario, what happened? Like this was
This is a local transaction, right?
Yes, this is local transaction.
Okay.
If you open
Oh,
this,
can we delete this then can we delete this row from the transaction and run the
sure.
service once again?
Yeah. So now you see there is no data here.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you see this is the insert adapter service which is using a local transaction.
Local transaction, yeah.
Okay. Now in the adapter service, the first one I am passing all the required parameters.
Yes, yes.
In the second, I'm intentionally making employee ID as null because
yeah.
as per the condition of that column, it should not be null. Now I'm running this, and here I'm passing all
click OK. So it is failed. Okay.
Now if I'm going and selecting the designation again, it will not give you any output.
Yeah.
But the similar way we are doing it for the no transaction, it will give you output. So basically that is the concept of a local transaction. Like if one of this get fails, it will roll back everything with but that it has to be in same connection. It should not be like it has to be in different connection.
If it is in different connection, then we'll have to explicitly state the commit and rollback steps. Yeah.
Because we cannot have different connections within a single boundary, because if we are using an implicit, we are relying on an integration server. So we are not telling the integration server this is the start or commit of the boundary or the rollback of the boundary. So that is the difference between the implicit local transaction and how the behavior is with respect to the no transaction.
Yeah, got it.
So any query till now, like in understanding the things, then we'll. What else?
Not for me, Piyush.
Piyush, like JDBC types will select in connection type, right? That's 4 types of JDBC types, like for connecting to database to integration server, like thin layer we have and some other things like.
No, you see my screen, right? These are the properties available. So can you tell me where exactly JDBC? Are you telling me about the driver type?
Driver type, driver.
Okay. So yeah, tell me your question.
Yeah, like how will do that? Like will Oracle people tell us like which to select, or according to how will select, like on which basis will select the?
No, like basically we are interacting to some system. Okay. Now these all information like the data source, class, server name, password, database name, port number, network, these all things will be told by the owner who has maintaining that particular system. So it can be anytime. So it all depends on the, let's say you are using a, for example, we need a jar files to connect it. So they will tell you, okay, this jar file is using a thick driver or a thin driver or whatever the driver. So they will tell you each and every detail. So.
Okay, fine.
So now coming to this stored procedure. Let's create a stored procedure.
Let's discuss XA transaction.
Fine, okay. But generally, like I've never used it in a real-time scenario.
Even I never used XA transaction.
That is the problem. Like it's purely a complete theoretical.
Just tell us a business scenario, one business scenario, so that should be fine.
Okay, so we have one more kind of transaction which is present in a any connection type, which we call it the XA transaction. But I have never used like this type of connection, like how to use. But the concept is like when we are going to use multiple kind of tables or I'm pretty not sure like how exactly, because I'm not implemented in real-time scenario. But the boundary definition of XA transaction is something like this. It's not basically related to web method. It's like a common concept. What happens, let's say we are connecting to any system and we have web methods here. Let's say we are connecting to any Oracle system. So what happens in XA transaction, we have a boundary condition defined here as well as the boundary condition defined here. So in this we call it as a two-phase commit. So whenever we are doing any operation, let's say in DML operation like insert or update, the source where we are doing an operation, it will send you a commit signal or rollback signal to the integration server. And once it receives the signal, then the integration server will do the commitment or the rollback. So that's why it is called as a two-phase. Like at first phase, it will be the boundary, the transaction boundary of commitment or rollback will be defined at the source system, and then it will be defined at a integration server layer. I believe that might be reason because we can use the XA transaction to interact with multiple databases or multiple columns, multiple tables at runtime, because we are, while switching from the different databases or different table, we are getting information from the source itself of the commitment or rollback. But frankly speaking, like I have never implemented this scenario in a real time till now. Like how exactly
I have seen a situation where this has been implemented in Oracle OFSA.
Okay.
Like in the Prudential itself. In the Prudential
can you
itself,
share
it has
the business scenario how exactly it was like?
Yeah, it is like there is a different system called ILI. ILI is nothing but when retirement insurance. Okay.
Okay.
We have group insurance for employment. Okay. There is a retirement insurance. Okay. But the group insurance has a logical database where employee will log in and do a payment of it. Okay. That transaction will have to, I mean, part of the transaction, it will go to the retirement policies as well. Okay. So there, logically speaking, these are two different entities completely. Okay. This is one database, one of the system. I mean, group insurance is one of the system, and the ILA is the different of the system itself. Okay. There is a common transaction a transaction ID. I would say in the web methods language, it is a common transaction ID, which is being passed from group insurance to ILI, and it checks the transaction level at ILI as well. When there is a commit at ILI, then it first it commits the second database, and later it comes to the first database and see if it is getting committed. Then it sends a success transaction. Okay. If there is any chance, if there is any failure happened at any of the commits, right, it will even roll back this transaction which was committed earlier. That is what I have seen it at Oracle Alpha level.
Okay.
I mean, this I have seen. I mean, there was an issue happened. So when we are debugging, the Oracle engineer told me this is how the XA transaction is working over there.
So
That is how I got it.
how exactly we are doing the commitment? Like, is it at the Oracle database level or from web methods we are
No,
passing the
not from Oracle, not from web methods. It is from
uh,
Oracle level itself.
uh,
It's completely different system. It is not related to web methods, but
okay.
there is web methods also involved in that integration. So we were involved into the call, and I was not understanding what is happening there. So I
Okay.
asked the Oracle engineer what is happening. He told me that it's an exit transaction.
Mhm.
So it rolled back the entire table for one user.
Yeah.
Once there is a single issue happened and it
Yeah.
got entire transaction got rolled back and his money is not credited back, it seems. So we
Okay.
raised the issue.
Okay. Yeah, because all these, like as you said, Kiran, like local transaction XA, no, it's not related to web method. It's a purely a general concept. When we are doing with Oracle or any IBM, even if you're sending data to message queue through JMS or anything, there also will have option called local XA or no transaction. So it's basically a concept how we are committing the operation or roll back the operation. I will do one
Yeah.
thing. I will try to find like is there a POC we can do to.
No. I'll do one thing. What I'll do is I'll sit with that engineer, okay, on Monday.
Okay.
I'll get the complete details of this Excel transaction. I'll get back to
Okay,
you.
that would be
Okay.
great.
I can
Thanks,
give you the
Kiran.
clear picture of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, I need to do a lot of setup.
No, not required. I'll do that.
Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
fine. Fine. Uh, Then we just left with the stored procedure and a stored procedure with signature and then execute a service. Let's complete that part. Then we'll move to the tomorrow. We'll move with notification. So we have a stored procedure and a stored procedure with signature. So the difference between the stored procedure and with signature is like that. If we are going to run a stored procedure and we don't want to pass any input parameter and we don't want to retrieve any output data, we have to use a stored procedure. So it will be a plain stored procedure kind of thing. Let's say you have a web methods tables and you want to archive the data internally, so we can develop a stored procedure in Oracle and call it from the web method, so we don't have to pass an input parameter and get the output. But in the scenario where let's say we have to pass the input parameter, pass some data and get the response whether it is successful or failure, if it is a failure how which rows are failure, so all those things we have to use the stored procedure with signature, but the internal definition is exactly the same thing. The only difference is with respect to the parameter we are passing. Now, once you are using a stored procedure, it will again ask you to select the catalog name, I mean the main head schema and all the sub schemas present within a particular database. And let's say if I'm using this schema, and then it will ask you option to enter procedure lookup name. So if it is false, it will not give you any drop down list. False means, let's say if I'm setting as a true, so what will happen internally, web methods will try to list whatever the stored procedure which are present in this particular database name sys. So you have to just select that particular stored procedure and save it, and just simply we have to, let's say if you want to get the result set or parameter, simply we have to run this and it will call the stored procedure and it will execute it. If we are setting it as a false, we have to explicitly give the name. So you just try to create a stored procedure in Oracle and then try to call this service. It's a similar thing with respect to the uh, a stored procedure with signature. Coming to the last part. Do we have executor service? We have already. Okay. No. Okay. So there is one more template which has been provided in the adapter service, which we called it as executor service. Let's select. this is the parameter which we call as execute a service. So I've already created one here, present here. So what is the use of the executor service? And generally the documents tell like that. When we are creating an adapter service, we are using a connection here. So we are using a resource or a thread from a connection thread pool. We can pass the same resource to a particular service, and that particular service can use that particular thread or resource to connect again to some systems. So that is the use of this operation. Like when we are using executor service, you have to just select the service name. The important point we have to take care is like the input parameter. The service input parameter should be exactly the same, and the service output parameter should be exactly the service name which is getting configured here. And then in the service you have to write the custom logic to fetch the thread and then use that thread. Again, for this scenario, like I have never seen a real practical example of like where we can use it. What about you, Kiran? Like, have you seen anywhere like are you using executor service? Hello?
Yeah, Piyush.
Like I was just asking, like, have you like seen any real-time scenario where we use this executor service template?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, by any chance, did you get a chance to work on this executor service
No,
with
no,
JDBC?
no.
Oh, okay.
Just I was thinking of checking with you.
No.
Fine. In that case, I will share you some POCs with respect to database. Okay, I'll just try to do it.
I mean, Piyush, where you're saying, where you're sending the POCs, I mean, to complete it, because I'm not seeing anything over here in the chat. I mean, last week we were trying to
I'm
see
sending
something
in.
about.
Yes, I have sent it in email. Maybe I have not sent it to you. Exactly.
Okay.
Well, I will send it to you also.
Please include my email ID as well.
Okay. It's the same like week then something was there, right?
No, 1 second.
Can you ping me the email ID?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'll send it to you as well.
Yeah.
One last thing, like I want to was telling about the kind of transaction type. Right? So always remember, like in a single boundary condition, we can have only one type of connection, which is using local transaction, but we can have multiple connection which can use no transaction. The reason is because no transaction is auto commit. We don't have to define anything, but in local transaction, either we have to rely on server or we have to explicitly commit it. So while doing the design of any code, we have to remember such scenario. Okay, fine. Tomorrow we'll go with the adapter notifications. Is it fine, right?
Yeah, sure, Piyush.
Fine. That means thanks for joining the call. Like
Yeah.
we'll
Yes,
yeah. Tell me, Jyoti.
yeah. Yesterday we were discussing about block timeout and expire timeout. Just I'm just bit confused in between those. Just I will tell you like let me correct me if I'm wrong.
Tell me.
Yeah, expire timeout is like for a particular resource to wait. Like if my 10 connections are already full,
Yes,
and I
sir.
don't have any next connection to any connection to connect to the resource.
Yes, sir.
So in that time, the particular that resource it will wait for a particular timeout. That time, that 1000 milliseconds or whatever, that is called a expiry timeout. Is it
No,
so?
no. Let's say you have a 10 transaction, 10 connection, which is now full. Okay.
Huh?
Now, integration server will monitor that 10 transaction, whatever the threads they are using, they continuously check.
Okay.
Okay. So they will check if that particular connection, okay,
Hmm.
is stale connection. Stale connection in the sense it is basically not in use. Okay.
Okay.
Or if the service is not basically using it or service is in heaven, so it will wait for these particular time. After that it will close the connection. So the expired timeout is with respect to the already used resources. The block time.
POCs.
Okay.
No, the connection which is already, already in use and it is inactive.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So integration server will check monitor the connection. If the connection is still inactive, it will wait for the expiry time, and once the expiry time is reached, it will make the connection inactive, and it will be, it will make the connection available for the next resource.
Yes. So the connection will be now present in the connection pool, so we can utilize that connection.
Okay.
Okay. And the block timeout is with respect to the new. If already all the resources are occupied, and if some new services are demanding for the resource, so it has to wait for that particular time.
Okay.
Any other question? Fine. I will share you some POCs. Just try to do it. Okay. Like I will include you the previous scenarios as well. Like we have developed lots of flow services, right? Like reading of data from a file, and then so we'll include a scenario like read the data from a file and then insert into a database. So we'll
Sure.
as soon as we are going cover as soon as we are covering each and every topic, we'll include that part in POCs. So it will give you a feeling kind of real time scenario how it happens. Sir.
Okay, Piyush, sure.
Okay, guys. Like it will again tomorrow. We'll join at the same time. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks. Bye bye.